$50,000. In most of America, that barely covers a used car. But in certain corners of the desert Southwest, it will buy you a house. There is just one problem, and it is not a small one. No water, not unreliable water, not expensive water, no water. The kind of no water where you have to schedule a truck to come out and fill a tank in your yard just so you can wash your hands. The kind of no water where the well that existed when you bought the place is now a dry hole because something upstream, a mega dairy, a foreign-owned alfalfa farm, an industrial operation pumping millions of gallons a day, has quietly drained the aquifer that entire communities were built on top of. These are not ghost towns. People live in them right now. And the real question is not why the houses are cheap. It is what it actually costs to survive in a place that has run out of water. Subscribe for more content like this and drop your location and time in the comments because you never know, you might find someone watching nearby. Now let's begin. Number 6, Wonder Valley, California. Wonder Valley sits out in the Mojave Desert, about 40 minutes east of Palm Springs on the way to nowhere in particular. From the road, it looks like the desert floor just decided to sprout small wooden structures at random intervals. That is essentially what happened. Back in the 1930s and 40s, the Federal Small Tract Act allowed people to claim 5-acre parcels out here for almost nothing, as long as they built a cabin and spent time on the land. Thousands did. The cabins were simple, often just one room, wood frame, no insulation, no plumbing. When the homestead era ended, many were abandoned. Others changed hands for almost nothing over the decades. Today, you can still buy one of those original structures for around $45,000. What you will not get is running water. There are no municipal lines out here. There never were. The closest place to fill up a tank is back in 29 Palms, and as of 2026, fuel surcharges have pushed hauling costs up to the point where some residents are spending several $100s a month just to maintain basic water supply. That is on top of whatever the house itself costs. Some people find the isolation beautiful. The night sky out there is real. The quiet is real. But the math of hauling water every week across open deserts adds up fast, and it does not get easier over time. Number 5, Ash Fork, Arizona. Ash Fork is the kind of town that Interstate 40 passes through without really stopping for. It sits at around 5,000 feet elevation in north-central Arizona, a stretch of high desert that looks more dramatic than flat desert, but works against you in a very specific way. The elevation matters because of the geology. In low desert areas, wells sometimes hit usable water at a few hundred feet. In Ash Fork, the water table is so deep that drilling a private well can run over $100,000 and still may not find enough. The local bedrock essentially forces most residents into permanent hauling mode before they have even finished unpacking. Homes here can be found for $35,000 and up. Some are shed-style structures converted into living spaces. Some are lots where a structure could go. In every case, the assumption built into daily life is that water will arrive by truck, not as a temporary measure, not while you wait for infrastructure to catch up, permanently, as the baseline condition of living there. That is a strange thing to build a budget around, a house cheap enough to buy outright on land where the cost of staying hydrated is the actual long-term expense. Number 4, Meadview, Arizona. Here's the one that sounds impossible until you look at a map. Meadview sits at the western end of Lake Mead, just inside Arizona. On a clear day, depending on where you stand, you can see the water. The reservoir, one of the largest in the country, is right there. And yet residents of Meadview cannot tap into it. There is no infrastructure to move that water from the lake to the homes, no treatment facility, no distribution lines, no practical path. What Meadview has instead is a standpipe, a central fill station where residents drive to collect water and haul it back themselves. That is the system, not a backup system. The system. Off-grid cabins in Meadview list around $48,000. The landscape is genuinely striking. The proximity to the Grand Canyon's western reaches and the lake makes it appealing in a rugged way that certain buyers respond to. But the distance from services is real, the roads are real, and the gap between what the scenery suggests and what daily life actually requires is about as large as a gap can get. You can see the water. You just cannot use it. Number 3, Golden Valley, Arizona. Golden Valley is one of those Arizona communities that grew without much of a plan. It sits west of Kingman, out toward the Nevada state line, and it expanded the way a lot of rural desert areas did in the mid-20th century, fast, cheap, and without too much attention paid to whether the land could actually support permanent habitation. A significant number of homes here were built without what Arizona calls assured water supply. That is the legal designation for having a verified long-term water source before you build. Some of these properties never had it. Others had wells that have since gone dry as the water table has dropped. The official term used for the water situation in many Golden Valley neighborhoods is Wildcat Haul, meaning residents source their own water however they can manage, typically by truck delivery. Homes currently list between $30,000 and $55,000, and the condition varies enormously. Some are solid handyman specials with real potential. Others are structures that have spent years absorbing the desert. But the water situation is consistent. Haul in, store it, ration it, repeat. What makes Golden Valley worth noticing is the scale. This is not a tiny community of a few dozen people. A significant number of households are living this way, and the infrastructure to fix it has never materialized at the level the population would need. Number 2, Salome and Wenden, Arizona. The La Paz County stretch along Highway 60 is where things get harder to look away from. Salome and the neighboring community of Wenden sit in the McMullen Valley, a flat agricultural basin in western Arizona. For decades, people lived here on modest incomes, drawing from local wells for farming and domestic use. Then came Al Dara, a Saudi-owned agricultural company, which established large-scale alfalfa operations in the region. Alfalfa is one of the most water-intensive crops grown in the American desert. It is also legal. Arizona groundwater law has historically allowed large-scale pumping with limited restriction, particularly in rural areas outside designated management zones. The effect on domestic wells in the area has been measurable and documented. Local residents and county officials have reported wells dropping 10 to 20 feet per year. Some have gone dry. The replacement cost for a deeper well, if water can even be found, runs far beyond what most households in Salome or Wenden can absorb. Mobile homes with land in this area can still be found for around $42,000, but the purchase price is not really the issue. The issue is what happens when you drill 50 feet deeper and still come up dry. The water that used to be under this valley is being moved elsewhere, legally, and the people left behind are hauling. Number 1, Pearce and Sunizona, Arizona. The road through Pearce and Sunizona cuts through the Sulphur Springs Valley in southeastern Arizona, about 40 miles from the Mexican border. It is quiet country, old ranching country, the kind of place where people expected the land to work with them. What happened instead was a dairy. Riverview LLP, a large concentrated animal feeding operation, moved into the valley and began pulling water from the shared aquifer at a scale that reshaped the entire groundwater picture. Hundreds of cows require enormous daily water volumes. The pumping is not illegal, but the consequences for nearby property owners have been severe and well documented. Private wells that function for decades have simply failed. Not dropped. Failed. Residents in Pearce and Sunizona have organized, petitioned, testified, and in some cases, sued. The aquifer situation has drawn attention from local media, advocacy groups, and state officials. It is an ongoing situation, not a resolved one. And yet homes here still sell. A distressed manufactured home currently lists at around $49,000. For buyers, the calculus is this: the house is real, the land is real, but water now arrives by truck, typically 3,000-gallon tank deliveries, scheduled in advance, paid in full, and consumed as carefully as possible until the next one comes. This is the #1 spot, not just because of how cheap the homes are or how severe the water situation is, but because of how clearly it shows what happens when industrial water use and rural residential use share the same aquifer with no meaningful separation. One side wins, the other hauls. There is something that runs through all 6 of these places that goes beyond real estate. It is a lesson about what cheap actually means when you follow it far enough. In the housing market, a $50,000 home sounds like freedom. And in some ways, it is. But the American desert is not a forgiving place to be wrong about your assumptions. Water is not a feature you can add later. It is not something you work around indefinitely. It is the first requirement, and in every town on this list, that requirement has become the most expensive thing about being there. Some of these communities will find a way forward. Infrastructure will come, or regulations will change, or people will adapt in ways that are hard to predict. Others may quietly thin out over the next decade, leaving behind the same structures that look interesting on a listing page and tell nothing about what daily life inside them actually looked like. If you are thinking about cheap desert land, do not skip the water question. Ask where it comes from. Ask what happens if that source fails. Ask who is pumping upstream. Because in 2026, in these 6 places, somebody already asked those questions too late. Subscribe if you stayed till the end and enjoyed the video. See you later for now.